Welcome to this chapter by chapter reading of the Montessori Method by Dr. Maria Montessori. When I was starting my Montessori school, I turned directly to Dr. Montessori's original writings, partly out of conviction and partly because they were available in the public domain and free. What I didn't realize at the time was I was reading the original English translation commissioned while Dr. Montessori was still alive, translated in 1912 by Anne E. George. Later, I discovered that many of us have encountered Montessori through later translations, especially the 1967 version, which helped spread the method widely in the US, and for which I'm personally grateful. But returning to the original text, I found something more: Dr. Montessori's full voice, her depth, her vision, and her spiritual and philosophical foundations. In this podcast, I'm reading the original translation chapter by chapter, adding reflections to help connect her words to today's classrooms and families. This is an experiment, an adventure, and a shared journey of learning. Let's begin. Hello, how is everyone doing today? Welcome to reading the Montessori Method chapter by chapter. Today we are doing chapter 13, which is Education of the Senses and Illustrations of the Didactic Material, General Sensibility, the Tactile, Thermatic, Baric, and Stereognostic Senses. And we are reading from the 1912 translation by Anne E. George. And I'm excited to get started on this chapter. This chapter is very special to me because I remember reading it. It was on the Amazon Kindle app on my phone. This is where I read this the first time. And so I'm like reading it. And when I got to this chapter, I remember just how nostalgic I got because there was all these photographs, and I'm going to show you these photographs as I read through. And it was so fun for me to remember all of these materials from my childhood. And and it was just so wonderful. And I remember meeting up with a friend of mine, and I was talking about the work I was doing and where I was in all of this, and how nostalgic I got reading this chapter. And I'm showing her on my phone all the photos of these children using these same materials that I used as a child. I was like, don't you remember this? Don't you remember enjoying all of this? And she looks at me quizzically and is like, I don't remember any of this. It looks very strange to me. It's like, okay. We've had very different experiences. And anyways, it was just a fun memory for me to read this chapter again, and I'm excited to share it with you today. Um, so this chapter, as I said, is on the sensorial materials. And and I think in the last chapter, actually, I know in the last chapter I got a lot of things confused. I said it was chapter 11 instead of chapter 12. And I also said that there was only two, or there was two. This was an important piece of Dr. Montessori's work because there were two chapters dedicated on it. That is not true. There are three chapters dedicated on this, and I can't believe I missed it. And it's because this chapter is just so long that I think that the third chapter just kind of snuck in there for me in my head. I'm not sure. Anyways, there are three chapters. This is super, super important in the children's house or in the primary classroom. And um, and she goes over the rough and smooth boards. She goes over the thermatic bottles. She goes over the Baric tablets. She goes over the she doesn't call all of these exactly what we call them today. I just want to point that out. So she talks about the mystery bag. She doesn't mention it by name at all, the mystery bag, but it's something that we're doing in the classrooms now called the mystery bag lesson, and the children love it. As she describes in this, as you'll see, how the children just love it. Things don't change that much. And then she talks about the cylinder blocks, the pink tower, the broad stairs, the long rods, the geometric cabinet, the color tablets, the sound cylinders, the bells, the silence games, and she kind of mentions briefly a lesson that we do, and it's called March Fast Walk Skip Game. And so we'll get to hear how she describes it in the book. And she talks a lot about the role of silence and movement. And and so this is uh, just a fun chapter to go through. I'm looking forward to reading this with you and sharing it. Anyways, and so there we are, and I'll go ahead and get started. So we are reading chapter 13, Education of the Senses, and illustrations of the didactic material, general sensibility, general sensibility, the tactile, thermatic, baric, and stereognostic senses. The education of the tactile and the thermatic senses go together, since the warm bath and heat in general render the tactile senses more acute. Since to exercise the tactile senses, it is necessary to touch. Bathing the hands in warm water has the additional advantage of teaching the child to a principle of cleanliness, that of not touching objects with hands that are not clean. I therefore apply the general notions of practical life regarding the washing of the hands, care of the nails, to the exercises preparatory to the discrimination of tactile stimuli. The limitation of the exercises of the tactile sense to the cushion tips of the fingers is rendered necessary by practical life. It must be made a necessary phase of education because it prepares for a life in which man exercises and uses the tactile sense through the medium of those fingertips. Hence, I have the child wash his hands carefully with soap in a little basin, and in another basin to have him rinse them in a bath of tepid water. Then I show him how to dry and rub his hands gently in a way preparing for the regular bath. I next teach the child how to touch, that is, the manner in which he should touch surfaces. For this, it is necessary to take the finger of the child and to draw it in very, very lightly over the surface. Another particular of the technique is to teach the child to hold his eyes closed while he touches, encouraging him to do this by telling him that he will be able to feel the differences better, and so leading him to distinguish without the help of sight of contrast the change of contact. He will quickly learn and will show that he enjoys the exercise. Often, after the introduction of such exercises, it is a common thing to have a child come to you and, closing his eyes, touch with great delicacy the palm of your hand or the cloth of your dress, especially any silken or velvet trimmings. They do verily exercise the tactile sense. They enjoy keenly touching any soft, pleasant surface and become exceedingly keen in discriminating between the differences in the sandpaper cards. The didactic material consists of a rectangular wooden board divided into two equal rectangles, one covered with very smooth paper, or having the wood polished until a smooth surface is obtained, the other covered with sandpaper. B. A tablet like the preceding covered with alternating strips of smooth paper and sandpaper. I also make use of a collection of paper slips varying through many grades of smooth, fine cardboard to coarse sandpaper. The stuffs described elsewhere are also in these lessons. As to the thermic sense, I use a set of little metal bowls, which are filled with water at different degrees of temperature. These I try to measure with the thermometer so that there may be two containing water of the same temperature. Excuse me. Here is one of the pictures. Isn't that wonderful? It says at the bottom, the cloister school of the Franciscan nuns in Rome, children playing a game with tablets of colored silk. And here is another photo there. There are two photos, excuse me. And it says that the top photo is a girl touching a letter and boy telling objects by weight. And then the lower photo is arranging tablets of silk in their chromatic order. There are 8 colors and 8 shades of each color, making 64 gradations in all. I have designed a set of utensils which are to be made of very light metal and used with water, and filled with water. These have covers and to each attach a thermometer. The bowl touched from the outside gives the desired impression of heat. I also have children put their hands in cold, tepid, and warm water, an exercise which they find most diverting. I should like to repeat this exercise with the feet, but I have not had an opportunity to make the trial. For the education of the Baric sense of weight, I use with great success little wooden tablets, 6 by 8 centimeters, having a thickness of a half centimeter. These tablets are in 3 different qualities of wood: wisteria, walnut, and pine. They weigh respectively 24, 18, and 12 grams, making them differ in weight by 6 grams. These tablets should be very smooth if possible, varnished in such a way that every roughness shall be eliminated, but so that the natural color of the wood shall remain. The child, observing the color, knows that they are of differing weights, and this offers a means of controlling the exercise. He takes 2 of the tablets in his hand, letting them rest upon the palm at the base of his outstretched fingers. Then he moves the hands up or down in order to gauge the weight. This movement should come to be little by little almost insensible. We lead the child to make his distinction purely through the difference in weight, leaving out the guide of the different colors and closing his eyes. He learns to do this of himself and takes great interest in guessing. The game attracts the attention of those near, who gather in a circle about the one who has the tablets and who takes turns in guessing. Sometimes the children spontaneously make use of the blindfold, taking turns and interspersing the work with peals of joy and laughter. Education of this stereognostic sense. The education of the sense leads to the recognition of objects through feeling, that is, through the simultaneous help of the tactile and muscular senses. Taking this union as a basis, we have made experiments which have given marvelously successful educational results. I feel that for the help of teachers, these exercises should be described. The first didactic material used by us is made up of the bricks and cubes of Froebel. We call the attention of the child to the form of the 2 solids, have him feel them carefully and accurately with his eyes open, repeating some phrase serving to fix his attention upon the particulars of the forms presented. After this, the child is told to place the cubes to the right, the bricks to the left, always feeling them and without looking at them. Finally, the exercise is repeated by the child blindfolded. Almost all the children succeed in the exercise. After 2 or 3 times, are able to eliminate every error. There are 24 of the bricks and cubes in all, so that the attention may be held for some time through this game. But undoubtedly the child's pleasure is greatly increased by the fact of his being watched by a group of his companions, all interested and eager. One day a directress called my attention to a little girl of 3 years, one of our very youngest pupils, who had repeated this exercise perfectly. We seated the little girl comfortably in an armchair close to the table. Then, placing the 24 objects before her upon the table, we mixed them and, calling the child's attention to the difference in forms, told her to place the cubes to the right and the bricks to the left. When she was blindfolded, she began the exercise as taught by us, taking an object in each hand, feeling each, and putting it in its right place. Sometimes she took 2 cubes or 2 bricks. Sometimes she found a brick in the right hand and a cube in the left hand. The child had to recognize the form and to remember throughout the exercise the proper placing of the different objects. This seemed to me very difficult for a child of 3 years. But observing her, I saw that she not only performed the exercise easily, but the movements with which she had taught her to feel the forms were superfluous. Indeed, the instinct she had taken the 2 objects in her hands, if it so happened that she had taken a cube with the left hand and a brick in the right, she exchanged them immediately, and then began the laborious feeling the form which we had taught and which she perhaps believed to be obligatory. But the objects had been recognized by her through the first light touch. That is, the recognition was contemporaneous, to the taking. Continuing my study of the subject, I found that this little girl was possessed by remarkable functional ambidexterity. I should be very glad to make a wider study of this phenomenon, having in view the desirability of a simultaneous education of both hands. I repeated the exercise with other children and found that they recognized the objects before feeling their contours. This was particularly true of little ones. Our educational methods in this respect furnished a remarkable exercise in associative gymnastics, leading to a rapidity of judgment which was truly surprising, and had the advantage of being perfectly adapted to very young children. These exercises in the stereognostic sense may be multiplied in many ways. They assume the children who find delight in the recognition of a stimulus, as in the thermic exercises, for example. They may raise any small object, toy soldiers, little balls, and, above all, the various coins in common use. They come to discriminate between small forms varying very slightly, such as corn, wheat, and rice. They are very proud of seeing without eyes, holding out their hands and crying, "Here are my eyes! I can see with my hands." Indeed, our little ones, walking in the ways we have planned, make us marvel over their unforeseen progress, surprising us daily. Often while they are wild with delight over some new conquest, we watch in deepest wonder and meditation. Education of the senses of taste and smell. This phase of sense education is most difficult and have not yet had any satisfactory results to record. I can only say that the exercises ordinarily used in the tests of psychometry do not seem to me to be practical for use with young children. The olfactory sense in children is not developed to any great extent, and this makes it difficult to attract their attention by means of this sense. We have made use of one test which has not been repeated often enough to form the basis of a method. We have the child smell fresh violets and jasmine flowers. We then blindfold him, saying, "Now we're going to present you with flowers." A little friend then holds a bunch of violets under the child's nose, that he may guess the name. Name the flower. For greater or less intensity, we present fewer flowers, or even one single blossom. But this part of education, like that of the sense of taste, can be obtained by the child during the luncheon hour, when we can learn to recognize various odors. As to taste, the method of touching the tongue with various solutions, bitter or acid, sweet, salty, is perfectly applicable. Children of 4 years readily lend themselves to such games, which serves as a reason for showing them how to rinse their mouth perfectly. The children enjoy recognizing various flavors. and learn after each test to fill a glass with tepid water and carefully rinse their mouths. In this way, the exercise for the sense of taste is also an exercise in hygiene. Okay, let me show you some pictures. Here are some photos. Okay. And she writes broad, the first picture is broad stairs, the second picture long stairs, and the third picture tower, blocks by which children are taught thickness, length, size. And here another another photo there. And at the bottom here, the top one is drawing table and inset. The second one is wooden tablets. These are partly covered with sandpaper to give rough and smooth surfaces. And then this last picture here, the bottom picture, solid insets. With these, the children working by himself learns to differentiate objects according to thickness, height, and size. Okay. Sorry, I just had to take notes. Something interesting that I thought of reading. Okay. Education of the sense of vision. Differential vision, differential visual perception of dimensions. First, solid insets. This material consists of 3 solid blocks of wood, each 55 centimeters long, 6 centimeters high, and 8 centimeters wide. Each block contains 10 wooden pieces, set in corresponding holes. These pieces are cylindrical shape, in shape, and are to be handled by means of a little wooden or brass button, which is fixed in the center of the top. The cases of cylinders are in appearance much like the cases of weights used by chemists. In the first set of the series, the cylinders are all of equal height, 55 millimeters, but differ in diameter. The smallest cylinder has a diameter of 1 centimeter, and the others increase in diameter at the rate of half centimeter. In the second set, the cylinders are all in equal diameter, corresponding to half the diameter of the largest cylinder in the preceding series, 27 millimeters. The cylinders in the set differ in height, the first being merely a little disc only a centimeter high, and the others increase 5 millimeters each, the 10th one being 55 millimeters high. In the third set, the cylinders differ both in height and diameter, the first being 1 centimeter high and 1 centimeter in diameter. 1 centimeter high and 1 centimeter in diameter, and each succeeding one increasing half centimeter in height and diameter. With these insets, the child, working by himself, learns to differentiate objects according to thickness, according to height, and according to size. In the schoolroom, these 3 sets may be played with by 3 children gathered about a table, an exchange of games adding variety. The child takes the cylinders out of the molds, mixes them upon the table, and then puts each back into its corresponding opening. These objects are made of hard pine, polished, and varnished. Second, large pieces in graded dimensions. There are 3 sets of blocks which come under this head, and it is desirable to have 2 of each of these sets in every school. Thickness. This set consists of objects which vary from thick to thin. There are 10 quadrilateral prisms, the largest of which has a base of 10 centimeters, the others decreasing by 1 centimeter. The pieces of equal length, 20 centimeters. These prisms are stained a dark brown. The child mixes them, scattering them over the little carpet, and then puts them in order, placing one against the other according to the gradation of thickness, observing that the length shall correspond exactly. These blocks, taken from the first to the last, form a species of stair, the steps of which grow broader toward the top. The child may begin with the thinnest piece or with the thickest, as suits his pleasure. The control of the exercise is not certain, as it was in the solid cylindrical insets. There, the large cylinders could not enter the small opening, the taller ones would project beyond the top of the block, etc. In this game of the big stair, the eye of the child can easily recognize an error, since if he mistakes the stair is irregular. That is, there will be a high step between which the step which should have ascended decreases. B. Length. Long and short objects. This set consists of 10 rods. These are four-sided, each face being 3 centimeters. The first rod is a meter long and the last a decimeter. The intervening rods decrease from first to last 1 decimeter each. Each space of 1 decimeter is painted alternating red or blue. The rods, when placed close to each other, must be so arranged that the colors correspond, forming so many transverse strips. The whole set, when arranged, has the appearance of a rectangular triangle made up of organ pipes, which descend on the side of the hypotenuse. The child arranges the rods, which have first been scattered and mixed. He puts them together according to the gradation of length and observes the correspondence of colors. This exercise also offers a very evident control of error, for the regularity of the descending length of the stairs along the hypotenuse will be alternating if the rods are not properly placed. This most important set of blocks will have its principal application in arithmetic, as we shall see. With it, one may count from 1 to 10 and may construct the addition and other tables. And it may constitute the first steps in the study of the decimal and metric system. Size. Objects, larger and smaller. This set is made up of 10 wooden cubes painted in rose-colored enamel. The largest cube has a base of 10 centimeters, the smallest of 1 centimeter. The intervening ones decrease 1 centimeter each. A little green cloth carpet goes with these blocks. This may be of oilcloth or cardboard. The game consists of building the cubes up, one upon the other, in order of their dimensions, constructing a little tower of which the largest cube forms the base and the smallest the apex. The carpet is placed on the floor and the cubes are scattered upon it. As the tower is built upon the carpet, the child goes through the exercise of kneeling, rising, etc. The control is given by the irregularity of the tower as it decreases toward the apex. A cube misplaced reveals itself because it breaks the line. The most common error made by the children in playing with these blocks at first is that of placing the second cube as the base and placing the first cube upon it, thus confusing the two largest blocks. I have noted that the same error was made by deficient children in the repeated trials I made with the test of Discrimination. At the question, which is the largest, the child would take not the largest, but that nearest it in size. Any of these three sets of blocks may be used by the children in a slightly different game. The pieces may be mixed upon a carpet or table and then put in order upon another table at some distance. As he carries each piece, the child must walk without letting his attention wander, since he must remember the dimensions of the piece for which he is to look upon the mixed blocks. The games placed in this way are excellent for children of 4 or 5 years, while the simple work of arranging the pieces in order upon the same carpet where they have been mixed is more adapted to little ones between 3 and 4 years of age. The construction of the tower with the pink cubes is very attractive to little ones of less than 3 years who knock it down and build it up time after time. Okay, more photos. Here we go. Here. All right. On the first set, a few of the many geometric insets of wood used to teach form. And then the top one on the second set is geometric insets of wood and frame. The frame furnishes the control necessary for exactness of work. And then the second one is the cabinet for storing geometric inset frames. Okay. So 2, differential visual perception of form and visual tactile muscular perception. Didactic material. Plain geometric insets of wood. The idea of these insets go back to Itard and was also applied by Seguin. In the school for deficients, I had made and applied these insets in the same form used by my illustrious predecessors. In these, there are 2 large tablets of wood placed one above the other and fastened together. The lower board was left solid, while the upper one was perforated by various geometric figures. The game consisted in placing in these openings the corresponding wooden figures, which, in order that they might be easily handled, were furnished with a little brass knob. In my school for deficients, I had multiplied the games, calling for these insets, and distinguished between those used to teach color and those used to teach form. The insets for teaching color were all circles. Those used for teaching form were all painted blue. I had great numbers of these insets made in gradation of color and in an infinite variety of form. This material was most expensive and exceedingly cumbersome. In many later experiments with normal children, I have, after many trials, completely excluded the plain geometric insets as an aid to the teaching of color, since this material offers no control of error, the child's task being that of covering the forms before him. I have kept the geometric insets, but have given them a new and original aspect. The form in which they are now made was suggested to me by a visit to the splendid manual training school in the Reformatory of St. Michael in Rome. I saw there wooden models of geometric figures which could be set into corresponding frames or placed above corresponding forms. The scope of these materials was to lead to exactness in the making of the geometric pieces in regard to control of dimension and form, the frame furnishing the control necessary for the exactness of the work. This led me to think of making modifications in my geometric insets, making use of the frame as well as the inset. I therefore made a rectangular tray which measured 30 by 20 centimeters. This tray was painted a dark blue and was surrounded by a dark frame. It was furnished with a cover so arranged that it would contain 6 of the square frames with their insets. The advantage of this tray is that the forms may be changed, thus allowing us to present any combination we choose. I have a number of blank wooden squares which make it possible to present as few as 2 or 3 geometric forms at a time, the other spaces being filled in by the blanks. To this material, I have added a set of white cards, 10 centimeters square. These cards form a series presenting the geometric forms in other aspects. In the first of the series, the form is cut from blue paper and mounted upon the card. In the second box of cards, the contour of the same figures is mounted in the same blue paper, forming an outline 1 centimeter in width. On the third set of cards, the contour of the geometric form is outlined by a black line. We have then the tray, the collection of small frames with their corresponding insets, and the set of cards in 3 series. I also designed a case containing 6 trays. The front of this box may be lowered when the top is raised, and the trays may be drawn out as one opens the drawers of a desk. So let me show you these photos. Go. And it says some of the card forms used in this exercise with the 3 series of cards. Okay, each drawer contains 6 of the small frames with their respective insets. In the first drawer, I kept the 4 plain wooden squares and 2 frames, one containing a rhomboid and the other a trapezoid. In the second, I have a series consisting of a square and 5 rectangles of the same length but varying in width. The third drawer contains 6 circles which diminish in diameter. In the fourth are 6 triangles. In the fifth, 5 polygons from a pentagon to a decagon. And the sixth drawer contains 6 curved figures, an ellipse, an oval, etc., like a flower-like figure formed by 4 crossed arcs. Exercise with the insets. This exercise consists in presenting to the child the large frame or tray in which we may arrange the figures as we wish to present them. We proceed to take out the insets, mix them upon the table, and then invite the child to put them back in place. This game may be played by even the younger children and holds the attention for a long period, though not for so long a time as the exercise with the cylinders. Indeed, I have never seen a child repeat this exercise more than 5 or 6 times. The child, in fact, expends much energy upon this exercise. He must recognize the form and must look at it carefully. At first, many of the children only succeed in placing the insets after many attempts, trying, for example, to place a triangle in a trapezoid, then a rectangle, etc. Or when they have taken a rectangle and recognize where it should go, they will still place it with the long side of the inset across the short side of the opening, and will only, after many attempts, succeed in placing it. After 3 or 4 successive lessons, the child recognizes the geometric figures with extreme facility and places the insets with the security which has a tinge of nonchalance, or with slight contempt for an exercise that is way too easy. This is the moment in which the child may be led to a methodical observation of the forms. We change the forms in the frames and pass from contrasted frames to analogous ones. The exercise is easy for the child who habituates himself to placing the pieces in their frames without error or false attempts. The first period of these exercises is at the time when the child is obliged to make repeated trials with figures that are strongly contrasted in form. The recognition is greatly helped by associating with the visual sense the muscular tactile perception of the forms. I have the child touch the contour of the piece with the index finger of his right hand, and then have him repeat this with the contour of the frame into which the pieces must fit. We succeed in making this a habit with the child. This is very easily attained since all children love to touch things. I have already learned through my work with deficit children that among the various forms, the sense memory, that of the muscular sense, is the most precious. Indeed, many children who have not arrived at this point of recognizing a figure by looking at it could recognize it by touching it, that is, by computing the movements necessary to the following of the contour. The same is true of the greater number of normal children. Confused as to where to place a figure, they turn it about, trying in vain to fit it in. Yet as soon as they have touched the two contours of the piece and its frame, they succeed in placing it perfectly. Undoubtedly, the association of the muscular tactile sense with that of vision aids in a most remarkable way the perception of forms and fixes them in memory. In such exercises, the control is absolute, as it was in the solid insets. The figure can only enter the corresponding frame. This makes it possible for the child to work by himself and to accomplish a genuine sensory auto-education in the visual perception of form. Exercise with the 3 series of cards. First series. We give the child the wooden forms and the cards upon which the white figure is mounted. Then we mix the cards upon the table. The child must arrange them in a line upon his table, which he loves to do, and then places the corresponding wooden pieces upon the cards. Here the control lies in the eyes. The child must recognize this figure and place the wooden piece upon it so perfectly that it will cover and hide the paper figure. The eye of the child here corresponds to the frame, which materially led him at first to bring the two pieces together. In addition to covering the figure, the child is to accustom himself to touching the contours of the mounted figures as a part of the exercise. The child always voluntarily follows those movements, and after he has placed the wooden inset, he again touches the contour, adjusting with his finger the superimposed piece until it exactly covers the form beneath. Second series. We give a number of cards to the child together with the corresponding wooden insets. In this second series, the figures are repeated by an outline of the blue paper. The child, through these exercises, is pressing gradually from the concrete to the abstract. At first, he handled only solid objects. Then he passed to a plane figure, that is, to the plane which it itself does not exist. He is now passing to the line, but this line does not represent for him the abstract contour of a plane figure. It is to him the path which he has so often followed with his index figure. This line is the trace of a movement. Following again the contour of the figure with his finger, the child receives the impression of actually leaving a trace, for the figure is covered by his finger and appears as he moves it. It is the eye now which guides the movement, but it must be remembered that this movement was already prepared for when the child touched the contours of the solid pieces of wood. Third series. We now present to the child the cards upon which the figures are drawn in black, giving him, as before, the corresponding wooden pieces. Here, he has actually pressed to the line, that is, to an abstraction, yet here, too, there is the idea of the result of a movement. This cannot be, it is true, the trace left by the finger, but, for example, of the pencil, which is guided by the hand in the same movements made before. These geometric figures in simple outline have grown out of a gradual series of representations which were concrete to vision and touch. These representations return to the mind of the child that he performs the exercise of superimposing the corresponding wooden figures. Okay, some more photos. Okay, and this one's says the first one is lacing, the second one is shoe buttoning, the third one is buttoning of other garments, and the fourth one, hooks and eyes. Frames illustrating the different processes of dressing and undressing. Okay, and here is another photo. Okay, and these are tablets wound with colored silk, used for educating the chromatic sense. The tablets are shown in the boxes in which they are kept. All right. 3, differential visual perception of colors, education of the chromatic sense. In many of our lessons on the colors, we make use of pieces of brightly colored stuffs and of balls covered with wool of different colors. The didactic material for the education of the chromatic sense is the following, which I have established after a long series of tests made upon normal children in the Institute for Deficits, used, as I have said above, the geometric insets. The present material consists of small flat tablets, which are wound with colored wool or silk. These tablets have a little wooden border at each end which prevent the silk-covered cards from touching the table. The child is also taught to take hold of the piece of these wooden extremities so that he need not soil the delicate colors. In this way, we are able to use this material for a long time without having to renew it. I have chosen 8 tints, and each one has with it 8 gradations of different intensity of color. There are therefore 64 color tablets in all. The 8 tints selected are black from gray to white, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, and brown. We have duplicate boxes of these 64 colors, giving us 2 of each exercise. The entire set, therefore, consists of 128 tablets. 128 tablets. There are contained in 2 boxes, each divided into 8 equal compartments, so that one box may contain 64 tablets. Exercises with the color tablets. For the earliest of these exercises, we select 3 strong colors, for example, red, blue, and yellow in pairs. These 6 tablets we placed upon the table before the child. Exercises with the color tablets. For the earliest of these exercises, exercises with the colored tablets. For the earliest of these exercises, we select 3 strong colors, for example, red, blue, and yellow in pairs. These 6 tablets we place upon the table before the child. Showing him one of the colors, we ask him to find its duplicate among the mixed tablets upon the table. In this way, we have him arrange the colored tablets in a column 2 by 2, pairing them according to color. The number of tablets in this game may be increased until the 8 colors or 16 tablets are given at once. When the strongest tones have been presented, we may proceed to the presentation of lighter tones in the same way. Finally, we present 2 or 3 tablets of the same color but of different tones, showing the child how to arrange these in order of gradation. In this way, the 8 gradations are finally presented. Following this, we place before the child the 8 gradations of 2 different colors, red and blue. He is shown how to separate the groups and then arrange each group in gradation. As we proceed, we offer groups of more nearly related colors, for example, blue and violet, yellow and orange, etc. In one of the children's houses, I have seen the following game played with the greatest success and interest and with surprising rapidity. The directress places upon a table about which the children are seated as many color groups as there are children, for example, 3. She then calls each child's attention to the color each is to select or which she assigns to him. Then she mixes the 3 groups of colors upon the table, and each child takes rapidly from the mixed heap of tablets all the gradations of his color and proceed to arrange the tablet, which, when thus placed in a line, give the appearance of a strip of shaded ribbon. In another house, I have seen the children take the entire box, empty the 64 color tablets upon the table, and after carefully mixing them, rapidly collect them into groups and arrange them in gradation, constructing a species of little carpet of delicately colored and intermingling tints. The children very quickly acquire an ability before which we stand amazed. Children of 3 years are able to put all of the tints in gradation. Experiments in color memory. Experiments in color memory may be made by showing the child a tint, allowing him to look at it as long as he will, and then asking him to go a distance upon a table which all the colors are arranged, and select from among them a tint similar to the one at which he has looked. The children succeeded in this game remarkably, committing only slight errors. Children of 5 years enjoy this immensely, taking great pleasure in comparing the two spools and judging as to whether they have chosen correctly. At the beginning of my work, I made use of instrument invented by Pizzoli. This consisted of a small brown disc having a half-moon shaped opening at the top. Various colors were made to pass behind this opening by means of a rotary disc, which was composed of strips of various colors. The teacher called the attention of a child to a certain color, then turned the disc, asking him to indicate the same disc when it again showed itself in the opening. This exercise rendered the child inactive, preventing him from controlling the material. It is not, therefore, an instrument which can promote the education of the senses. Exercise for the discrimination of sound. It would be desirable to have in this connection the didactic material used for the auricular education in the principal institutions for deaf mutes in Germany and America. These exercises are an instruction to the acquisition of language and serve in a very special way to center the children's discriminative attention upon the modulations of the sound of the human voice. With very young children, linguistic education must occupy a most important place. Another aim of such exercises is to educate the ear of the child to noises so that he shall accustom himself to distinguish every slight noise and compare it with sounds, coming to resent harsh or disordered noises. Such sense education has a value in that it exercises aesthetic taste and may be applied in a most noteworthy way to practical discipline. We all know how the younger children disturb the order of the room by shouts and by the noise of overturned objects. The rigorous scientific education of the sense of hearing is not practically applicable to the didactic method. This is true because the children cannot exercise himself through his own activity, as he does for the other senses. Only one child at a time can work with any instrument producing the gradation of sounds. In other words, absolute silence is necessary for the discrimination of sounds. Signorina Maccheroni Directus, first of the Children's House in Milan and later in one of the Franciscan convent in Rome, had invented and has had manufactured a series of 13 bells hung upon a wooden frame. These bells are to all appearance identical, but the vibrations brought about by a blow of a hammer produce the following 13 notes. Okay. The set consists of a double series of 13 bells, and there are 4 hammers. Having struck one of the bells in the first series, the child must find the corresponding sound in the second. This exercise presents grave difficulty, as the child does not know how to strike each time with the same force, and therefore produces sounds which vary in intensity. Even when the teacher strikes the bells, the children have difficulty in distinguishing between sounds. So we do not feel this is an instrument in its present form is entirely practical. For the discrimination of sounds, we use Pizzoli's series of little whistles. For the gradation of noises, we use small boxes filled with different substances, more or less fine, sand, or pebbles. The noises are produced by shaking the boxes. In the lessons for the senses of hearing, I proceed as follows. I have the teachers establish silence in the usual way, and then I continue the work, making the silence more profound. I say "st, st," in a series of modulations, now sharp and short, now prolonged and light as a whisper. The children, little by little, become fascinated by this. Occasionally, I say, more silent still, more silent. Then I then begin the sibilant st, st, again, making it always lighter and repeating more silent still in a barely audible voice. Then I say still in a low whisper. Now I hear the clock. Now I hear the buzzing of a fly's wings. Now I can hear the whisper of the trees in the garden. The children, ecstatic with joy, sit in such absolute and complete silence that the room seems deserted. Then I whisper, "Let us close our eyes." This exercise repeated so habituates the children to immobility and to absolute silence that when one of them interrupts, it needs only a syllable, a gesture to call him back immediately to perfect order. In the silence, we proceed to the production of sounds and noises, making these at first strongly contrasted, then more nearly like. Sometimes we present the comparisons between noise and sound. I believe that the best results can be obtained with the primitive means employed by Itard in 1805. He used the drum and the bell. His plan was a graduated series of drums for the noise, or better, for a heavy harmonic sounds, since these belong to a musical instrument, and a series of bells. The diapason, the whistles, the boxes are not attractive to the child, and do not educate the sense of hearing as do these other instruments. There is an interesting suggestion in the fact that the two great human institutions, that of hate, war, and that of love, religion, have adopted these two opposite instruments, the drum and the bell. I believe that after establishing silence, it would be educational to ring well-toned bells, now calm and sweet, now clear and ringing, sending their vibrations through the child's whole body. And when, besides the education of the ear, we have produced a vibratory education of the whole body through these wisely selected sounds of the bells, giving a peace that pervades the very fibers of his being, then I believe these young bodies would be sensitive to crude noises, and the children would come to dislike and to cease from making disordered, ugly noises. In this way, one whose ear has been trained by a musical education suffers from strident or discordant notes. I need give no illustration to make clear the importance of such education for the masses of childhood. The new generation would be more calm, turning away from the confusion and the discordant sounds which strike the ear today in one of the vile tenements where the poor live, crowded together, left by us to abandon themselves to the lower, more brutal human instincts. Musical education. This must be carefully guided by method. In general, we see little children pass by the playing of some great musicians as an animal would pass. They do not perceive the delicate complexity of sounds. The street children gather about the organ grinder, crying out as if to hail with joy the noises which will come instead of sounds. For the musical education, we must create instruments as well as music. The scope of such an instrument, in addition to the discrimination of sounds, is to awaken a sense of rhythm and, so to speak, to give the impulse toward calm and coordinate movements to those muscles already vibrating in the peace and tranquility of immobility. I believe that stringed instruments, perhaps some very much simplified harp, would be the most convenient. The stringed instruments, together with the drum and the bells, form the trio of the classic instruments of humanity. The harp is the instrument of the intimate life of the individual. Legend places it in the hand of Orpheus, folklore puts it into fairy hands, and romance gives it to the princess who conquers the heart of the wicked prince. The teacher who turns her back upon her scholars to play, far too often badly, will never be the educator of their musical sense. The child needs to be charmed in every way by the glance as well as by the pose. The teacher who, bending toward them, gathering them about her, and leaving them free to stay or go, touches the chords in a simple rhythm, putting herself in communication with them in relation with their very souls. So much the better if this touch can be accompanied by her voice, and the children left free to follow her, no one being obliged to sing. In this very way, she can select as adapted to education these songs which were followed by all the children, so she may regulate the complexity of rhythm to various ages. For she will see not now only the older children following the rhythm, now also the little ones. At any rate, I believe that simple and primitive instruments are the ones best adapted to the awakening of music in the soul of the little child. I have tried to have the directress of the Children's House in Milan, who is a gifted musician, make a number of trials and experiments with the view of finding out more about the muscular capacity of young children. She has made many trials with the pianoforte, observing how the children are not sensitive to the music tone, but only to the rhythm. On the basis of rhythm, she arranged simple little dances with the intention of studying the influence of the rhythm itself upon the coordination of muscular movements. She was greatly surprised to discover the educational disciplinary effect of such music. Her children, who had been led with great wisdom and art through the liberty to a spontaneous ordering of their acts and movements, had nonetheless lived in the streets and courts, and had almost universal habit of jumping. Being a faithful follower of the method of liberty, and not considering that jumping was a wrong act, she had never corrected them. She now noticed that as she multiplied and repeated the rhythm exercises, the children little by little left off their ugly jumping until finally it was a thing of the past. The directress one day asked for an explanation of this change of conduct. Several little ones looked at her without saying anything. The older children gave her various replies, whose meaning was the same. It's not nice to jump. Jumping is ugly. It's rude to jump. This was certainly a beautiful triumph for our method. This experience showed that it is possible to educate the child's muscular sense, and it shows how exquisite the refinement of this sense may be as it develops in relation to the muscular memory, and side by side with the other forms of sensory memory. Tests for acuteness of hearing. The only entirely successful experiments which we have made so far in the Children's House are those of the clock, and the lowering and whispered voice. The trial is purely empirical and does not lend itself to the measuring of the sensation, but it is, however, most useful in that it helps us to an approximate knowledge of the child's auditory acuteness. The exercise consists in calling attention when perfect silence has been established to the ticking of the clock, and to all the little noises not commonly audible to the ear. Finally, we call the little ones one by one from an adjoining room, pronouncing each name in a low voice. In preparing for such an exercise, it is necessary to teach the children the real meaning of silence. Toward this, I have several games of silence, which help in a surprising way to strengthen the remarkable discipline of our children. I call the children's attention to myself, telling them to see how silent I can be. I assume different positions, standing, sitting, maintaining each pose silently without movement. A finger moving can produce a noise, even though it is imperceptible. We may breathe so that we may be heard, but I mean absolute silence, which is not an easy thing to do. I call a child and ask him to do as I am doing. He adjusts his feet to a better position, and this makes noise. He moves an arm, stretching it out upon the arm of his chair. It is a noise. His breathing is not altogether silent. It's not tranquil, absolutely unheard as mine is. During these maneuvers on the part of the child, and while my brief comments are followed by intervals of immobility and silence, the other children are watching and listening. Many of them are interested in the fact which they have never noticed before, namely, that we make so many noises of which we are not conscious, and that there are degrees of silence. There is an absolute silence where nothing, absolutely nothing moves. They watch me in amazement when I stand in the middle of the room, so quietly that it is really as if I were not. Then they strive to imitate me and to do even better. I call attention here and there to a foot that moves almost inadvertently. The attention of the child is called to every part of his body in an anxious eagerness to attain immobility. When children are trying in this way, there is established a silence very different from that which we carelessly call by that name. It seems as if life gradually vanishes, and that the room becomes little by little empty, as if there were no longer anyone in it. Then we begin to hear the tick-tock of a clock, and this sound seems to grow in intensity as the silence becomes absolute. From the court which before seemed silent, there comes varied noises, birds chirps, a child passes. The children sit fascinated by that silence as if by some conquest of their own. Here, says the directress, here, there is no longer anyone. The children have all gone away. Having arrived at that point, we darken the windows and tell the children to close their eyes, resting their hands upon their heads. They assume the position, and in the darkness, the absolute silence returns. Now listen, we say, a soft voice is going to call your name. Then going to a room behind the children, we stand with it in the open door. I call in a low voice, lingering over the syllables as if I were calling from across the mountains. This voice, almost a call, seems to reach the heart and to call to the soul of the child. Each one, as he is called, lifts his head, opens his eyes, as if altogether happy, then rises, silently seeking not to move the chair, and walks on the tips of his toes so quietly that he is scarcely heard. Nevertheless, his step resounds in the silence, and amid the immobility which persists. Having reached the door with a joyous face, he leaps into the room, choking back soft outbursts of laughter. Another child may come to hide his face against my dress, another turning while we'll watch his companions sitting like statues, silent and waiting. The one who is called feels that he is privileged, that he has received a gift, a prize, and yet they know that all will be called, beginning with the most silent one in all the room. So each one tries to merit by his perfect silence the certain call. I once saw a little one of 3 years try to suffocate a sneeze and succeed. She held her breath in her little breast and resisted coming out victorious. a most surprising effort. This game delights the little ones beyond measure. Their intent faces, their patient immobility reveal the enjoyment of great pleasure. In the beginning, when the soul of the child was unknown to me, I had thought of showing them sweetmeats and little toys, promising to give them to the ones who were called, supposing that the gifts would be necessary to persuade the child to make the necessary effort. But I soon found that this was unnecessary. The children, after they had made the effort necessary to maintain silence, enjoyed the sensation, took pleasure in the silence itself. They were like ships safe in tranquil harbor, happy in having experienced something new, and to have won a victory over themselves. This indeed was their recompense. They forgot the promise of sweets and no longer cared to take the toys, which I had supposed would attract them. I therefore abandoned that useless means and saw with surprise that the game became constantly more perfect, until every child of 3 years of age remained immovable in the silence throughout the time required to call the entire 40 children out of the room. It was then that I learned that the soul of the child had its own reward and its peculiar spiritual pleasures. After such exercises, it seemed to me that the children came closer to me. Certainly, they became more obedient, more gentle and sweet. We had indeed been isolated from the world and had passed several minutes during which the communion between us was very close. I wish, I wishing for them and calling to them, and they receiving in the perfect silence the voice which was directed personally toward each one of them, crowning in turn with happiness. A lesson in silence. I'm about to describe a lesson which proved most successful in teaching the perfect silence to which it is possible to attain. One day, as I was about to enter one of the children's houses, I met in the court a mother who held in her arms a little baby of 4 months. The little one was swaddled, as is still the custom among the people of Rome. An infant thus in the swaddling bands is called by us a pupa. This tranquil little one seemed the incarnation of peace. I took her in my arms, where she lay quiet and good. Still holding her, I went toward the schoolroom, from which the children now ran to meet me. They always welcome me thus, throwing their arms about me, clinging to my skirts, and almost tumbling me over in their eagerness. I smiled at them, showing them the pupa. They understood and skipped about me, looking at me with eyes brilliant with pleasure, but did not touch me through respect for the little one that I held in my arms. I went into the schoolroom with the children clustered about me. We sat down, I seating myself in a large chair instead of, as usual, in one of their little chairs. In other words, I seated myself solemnly. They looked at my little one with a mixture of tenderness and joy. None of us had yet spoken a word. Finally, I said to them, I have brought you a little teacher. Surprised glances and laughter. A little teacher, yes, because none of you know how to be quiet as she does. At this, all the children changed their positions and became quiet. Yet no one holds his limbs and feet as quiet as she. Everyone gave closer attention to the position of limbs and feet. I looked at them smiling. Yes, but they can never be as quiet as hers. You move a little bit, but she not at all. None of you can be as quiet as she. The children looked serious. The idea of superiority of the little teacher seemed to have reached them. Some of them smiled and seemed to say with their eyes that the swaddling band deserved all the merit. Not one of you can be silent, voiceless as she. General silence. It is not possible to be as silent as she because listen to her breath, how delicate it is. Come near to her on your tiptoes. Several children rose and came slowly forward on tiptoe, bending toward the baby. Great silence. None of you can hold breath so silently as she. The children looked about amazed. They had never thought that even when sitting quietly, they were making noises, and that the silence of a little babe is more profound than the silence of grown people. They almost ceased to breathe. I rose. Go out quietly, quietly, I said. Walk on the tips of your toes and make no sound, or make no noise. Following them, I said, and yet I still hear some sounds. But she, the baby, walks with me and makes no sound. She goes out silently. The children smiled. They understood the truth and the jest of my words. I went to the open window and placed the baby in the arms of the mother who stood watching us. The little one seemed to have left behind her a subtle charm which enveloped the souls of the children. Indeed, there is in nature nothing more sweet than the silent breathing of a newborn babe. There is indescribably majestic about this human life which in repose and silence gathers strength and newness of life. Compared to this, Wordsworth's description of the silent peace of nature seems to lose its force. What calm, what quiet, the one sound, the dripping of the suspended oar. The children too felt the poetry and beauty in the peaceful silence of a newborn human life. That concludes this chapter of the Montessori Method. Thank you for listening and for taking part in this journey with me. This project is very much an exploration. If you have thoughts to add, questions to ask, or if you think I misunderstood or missed something important, I genuinely want to hear from you. Please message me, share your reflections, or continue the conversation with fellow listeners. On a quest to learning, relearning, and engaging deeply with Dr. Montessori's work as we go. Join me next time as we continue chapter by chapter.